Section 6.4 is about multiplying improper fractions and mixed numbers. So for working example number 1, we're going to multiply some mixed numbers together using a model. And the model can actually help a fair bit. So let's start off with a definition, and we've got a mixed number is made up of a whole number and a fraction. So both of these here are mixed numbers. There's a whole number and a fraction, whole number and a fraction. So for the first example, we're finding 2.5 times 1 3/4. And the process for doing that is as follows. You start off, you draw a rectangle. And when you're multiplying two numbers, that's like finding the area of a rectangle. So one number represents the side length, and the other number represents maybe the height of that rectangle. So you can draw it just like that to start with. The next step is to separate, or to draw some separate lines to divide these sections. So we're going to draw a dotted line down here. This length here becomes the whole number, and then the littler piece becomes the fraction part of it. And then we do the same thing on the other side where the 1 3/4 is. We draw a dotted line. The bigger section becomes the whole number, and the smaller section is the fraction part. So now we've created 4 unique little rectangles inside the big rectangle. And if we look at, for instance, this first rectangle, we see that it has a length of 1. Or one side is length 1 and the other side is length 2. So that means its area is 2 times 1. If you look at this rectangle, it has the same height as this bigger one. It has a height of 1, and it's got a width of 1/2. So its area is 1/2 times 1. This rectangle here, it is 2 long and 3/4 high, so its area is 2 times 3/4. And then finally we've got this fourth rectangle where it's 1/2 wide and 3/4 high, so its area is 1/2 times 3/4. So what we've done is we've created 4 rectangles, and we're indicating what their areas, or how to calculate the area of each one of those 4 rectangles. If you figure out the areas of each of the 4 rectangles and add them together, that gives you the area of the big version. And it's the area of the big version that ultimately is the answer between multiplying these 2 mixed numbers together. So that's the basic concept. To go through it, you look at this rectangle, it's 2 times 1 for its area, so it has an area of 2. This rectangle here is 2 times 3/4. Well, we know from the previous sections that 2 times 3/4 is 6/4. Then up here, 1/2 times 1. 1/2 times 1, well that's just 1/2. And then down in this corner, for this rectangle, we said it was 1/2 times 3/4. Well, 1 times 3 is 3, 2 times 4 is 8, so this becomes 3/8. So now we have 4 different numbers to represent the areas of these 4 different rectangles. So now we need to add them together. And so we take the 2. The 6/4 we can put into Lowest terms, we can convert it into a mixed number, and in this case, lowest terms is 3/2, which is 1.5. So we can rewrite it as 1.5. This one is 1/2, and then 3/8. So we're adding those 4 numbers together. So you add the whole numbers together. Well, we've got a 2 here, we've got a 1 here, so that becomes 3. Sorry. So the whole number, the 2 and the 1, you can add together, it becomes the 3, and then we've got our 3 fraction pieces here that we're going to add together. Well, we need a common denominator before we can do adding of fractions. And you should remember that process from last year, hopefully. Bottom number has to be the same before you can add the tops. So in this case, we've got a 2, 2, and an 8. We're going to use 8 as our common denominator, which means 1/2 becomes 4/8. And then this 1/2 becomes 4/8, and then 3/8 can stay the same. So then when you add these together, you're going to have 3, and then you add the numerators here. So 4 plus 4 is 8, plus 3 becomes 11. And the denominator stays the same. You don't add those together, remember that. That's the trick with adding fractions. You're only adding the top number together. So then 11 over 8 as a mixed number is 1 3/8. When you add that with 3, it becomes 4 3/8. And so that is your final answer to the original question. 2.5 times 1 3/4 is equal to 4 3/8. So to review, you start with a rectangle labeling your side lengths. Then you break each side into two pieces, one for the whole number, one for the fraction, one for the whole number, one for the fraction. Then you're going to calculate the area of each of these four pieces by using multiplication. You're going to multiply whole numbers for this one, so that's easy. These ones are going to be a fraction times a whole number. So again, that's the same stuff we've done already. And then this one is multiplying two fractions together. You're going to figure those out, then you have to add them together. So you do need to rely on some of your grade 7 math skills to do the adding. Once you add it up, then you have the total area of the original rectangle, which gives you the answer to the original question. So that's the process. So, next page is a show you know with 3 parts to it. Please give it a go.